Hello everyone, and welcome to our webinar on records of the 1828 census. My name is Gail Davis and I'll be your presenter for today. The records of the 1828 census are a unique set of records that we hold as part of the New South Wales State Archives. In February of 2019, the importance of these records was recognised when they were inscribed into UNESCO's Australian Memory of the World. This shows how important these records are. Many of you may know that previously in 2007, the records that we held relating to convict records have also been inscribed into UNESCO's Memory of the World. But today we're going to look at the records of the 1828 census. Just before we start looking at the records, I'd like to show you our website and where to find information on these records and indeed digital copies of many of them. On our home page, if you go to quick links, you will see Research A to Z. Click on that. It will then take you to the Research A to Z page where things are arranged alphabetically. Go to C for census and musters, then click on that, and then you're offered a number of options. Click on 1828 census, browse the alphabetical return. And there you will see the page where you can see the census just arranged alphabetically. You can see the first volume is A to CO, then the next CO to GO, GO to LE, LE to PO, PO to TI, and TI to ZE. So do have a look at that, and keep in mind it also gives you other information. If you scroll down on the page, there's more information about the 1828 census. And as it says, the census covers some 36,500 inhabitants, both convict and free, and captures a social and economic picture of the colony of New South Wales in November 1828. This is 40 years after the colony's establishment. It covers all settlements within the jurisdiction of the then colony of New South Wales, including Moreton Bay and Norfolk Island. It records such detailed information for each person, including children, as their name, their age, if free or convict, if born in the colony, or the ship and year of arrival, the sentence if they arrived as a convict, their religion, their employment, their residence, the district where they're living, the total number of acres cleared, cultivated, the number of horses, horned cattle, sheep, and any remarks. So do keep in mind that this is available. The alphabetical return is available now in a digital format, and we are in the processing of digitizing the other material, which will become progressively available. So the other records that make up the records of the 1828 census, aside from the alphabetical return, are the householders' returns, the district abstracts, the working papers, the Colonial Secretary's special bundle concerning the 1828 census. We'll be looking at each of these separately and in more detail in the course of this webinar. So the 1828 census was the first census held, and it was held in November of 1828 after it was found that a governor had no right to compel free men to come to a muster. The 1828 census was taken by order of an act of the Governor in Council. And here you can see a copy of that act, and you may like to note that it has a fine of up to £10 could be imposed for non-compliance. So if you didn't want to take part in the 1828 census, if you didn't turn up or you refused to fill out the form, then a fine could be implied. The 1828 census, as we've said, captures the historical, social and economic picture of the colony in November of 1828, 40 years after the colony's establishment. As well as the well-known historical figures appear, such as Lieutenant General Ralph Darling, who is the governor, Thomas Livingston Mitchell, Surveyor General, people such as Elizabeth MacArthur, Mary Reeby, Simeon Lord, Francis Greenway, William Charles Wentworth, and William Lawson are together included with ordinary men, women, and children listed in family groups. Let's have a look first of all at the alphabetical return. This is a list in alphabetical order by surname compiled from the individual census returns. Each individual has been allocated a running number within the letter of the alphabet. Besides a running number and name, the list records age, if free or bond, ship, year, sentence, religion, employment, residence, the district where they're living, total number of acres, cleared, cultivated, horses, horned cattle, sheep, and remarks. And it was one of these volumes of the 1828 census, this alphabetical return, which we took on our regional tour. And some of you listening today may well have come along and looked at one of the original volumes at a local library that participated in the regional tour. Here's an example of what one of the volumes looks like. When you open it up, beautiful title, New South Wales Census, taken in the month of November 1828. This is what the alphabetical volumes look like. This is the original cabinet in which they were stored. And as you can see, it's quite a large cabinet and it has a door which can be locked. Here's a close-up showing how the volumes do have the alphabetical sequence on the outside. And on the cover of each one, the letters contained in that volume have been tooled onto the leather. And there you can see the title page. Okay. And there you can see a volume opened up. In this case, you can see that it's Edward Gooden, and you can see how it is set up alphabetically. I'll be showing you Edward Gooden's household return later in the webinar so that you can compare the two and see how the information was compiled and then written up. The householders' returns do form part of the Archives Resources Kit, which is widely available. The individual householders' returns record the district number, the householder's name, the residence, the names of the family and of servants, and then for each individual person, their age, their class, that is whether they're free or bond, the ship, year of arrival, sentence, employment, residence, and religion. On the other side of the form, there is a land and stock return, which records the district where situated, the name of the farm, the name of the proprietor or tenant, the total number of acres cleared, cultivated, and the number of livestock, such as the number of horses, horned cattle, and sheep. Each district has been allocated a number, and returns are grouped into districts. Within each district, the forms are arranged by a running number. The returns from the government establishments have been extracted from their respective districts and filed together. The following householders' returns have survived for the following districts. Keep in mind the householders' returns are incomplete, but they have survived for the following districts: Kissing Point, Concord, Borkham Hills, Seven Hills, Castle Hill, Prospect, Field of Mars, Botany Bay, Holdsworthy. We'll also see that next to the item number, the microfilm reel number is given. The household returns have also survived for Cabramatta, Liverpool, Sydney, unfortunately there's one only, Cook, Evan, Melville, Bathurst, Wellington Valley, and Parramatta. It appears that the householders' returns were submitted from the 20th of November 1828 to at least the 22nd of August 1829, with their accuracy being confirmed up until the 17th of December 1829, following the issue of a circular dated 29 September 1829. Effectively, most of the householders' returns were originally enclosures to the Colonial Secretary's letters. While there are register entries, it appears that not all the registered letters remain extant. So just keep in mind, this in part explains why we often see people who haven't arrived till 1829 being included in the 1828 census. It looks as though it was a very long process that was still going well into 1829. This is an example of the householders' returns. You may remember a few slides ago, we saw the entry for Edward Gooden and his family or his household written up in the alphabetical sequence. Here you can see the householders' returns. You can see that he was 66 years of age and he was FS, which is free by servitude for his class. He'd arrived on the Scarborough, and so the information goes on. Not only is his family included, but there's also two men working for him who are his what you may call servants. One is free by servitude and the second one is GS, a government servant, meaning he's a convict, so he would be his assigned servant. The other thing that you should notice is that the person who was the witness to it was John Small, the district constable, and it's likely that he's filled out the form for Edward Gooden, as Edward Gooden could only sign X for his mark. The householder had to confirm that the information taken down was true and correct. If we have a look at the other side, you will see that the details of stock are given, so that he has a total number of 60 acres, 26 acres are cleared, 26 under cultivation. He has 6 horses, 42 horn cattle, and no sheep. And of course, his farm is at Kissing Point. The district abstracts also form part of the Archives Resources Kit. There are 2 forms of abstract, one for population and one for land and stock. They are filed with the householders' returns for their respective districts. The population abstract records the number of return, the name of the householder, and then for males and for females separately, the following information. Those that came free over 12 years and under 12 years, those born in the colony over 12 years and under 12 years, those that were freed by servitude, those that are pardoned, those that are bond, the total for each sex and a grand total. There is a division by the number of Protestant, Catholics, Jews and pagans, and the columns are totaled at the bottom of the page. The land and stock abstracts record the number of the bundle of the returns, where there is more than one, the name of the tenant or proprietor, the total number of acres, the acres cleared, acres cultivated, and of course the livestock, horses, horned cattle, and sheep. There are totals at the end of each column. So here you can see how it looks. This is for the abstract for the district of Kissing Point, and there you can see Edward Gooden towards the bottom of the screen. Just follow the arrow and you'll see Edward Gooden's details given for his household as a statistical return. The working papers comprise 3 sheets. These papers consist of 2 lists. One is a list of 19 government establishments. The second is a general abstract of the gangs to whom slop clothing was issued on the 1st of November 1828. It records the number of the gang and its name, the number of persons in the gang. It appears to have been compiled from a list with it, which records the names of individuals and the ships that they came in. And here you can see the general abstract of the gangs to whom slop clothing was issued on the 1st of November 1828. As you're looking at the screen down the bottom, on the left-hand side, you'll see that there's Iron Gang number 2, and that was on the Bathurst Road. And then over on the right-hand side, about 3/4 of the way up, you'll see Iron Gang number 3, which was at Wiseman Station. So it's really just giving a name of the convict and the ship of their arrival and which gang they belonged to at the time. Another one of the records that makes up the 1828 census records is the Colonial Secretary's special bundle. The bundle consists of instructions, circulars, and samples of forms to be used. It shows that the forms were especially designed for the census, being the first such documents designed in Australia. The forms were printed and distributed to constables and to other appointed collectors in the various districts, and when completed, form the householders' returns. And here you can see some of the printed instructions, and you'll see about in the middle of the screen the various abbreviations that were to be used. BC for born in the colony, CF for came free, FS free by servitude, AP for someone holding an absolute pardon, CP for someone holding a conditional pardon, TL for someone holding a ticket of leave, C for convict, CS for a colonial sentence, that means for a crime committed here, and GS for government or assigned servant. So just keep that in mind. And here you can see an example of one of the early forms when they were drawing them up. And if you look closely, you can see that they were going to ask a lot more than the final form. Imagine how people would feel not only having to answer how many acres were under cultivation, but if they're asking them how many were under having tobacco or potatoes growing in them. I think everyone would have thought it would take far too long to do such a form. But you can see how they were developing the forms to be used for the census. The 1828 census was the first and most detailed census taken in the Australian colonies. In New South Wales, censuses were held thereafter in 1833 and then every 5 years until 1861 and then every 10 years until 1901. Unfortunately, records of individual names have only survived for the 1841, 1891 and 1901 census, and then only the names of the heads of households, the other individuals making up those households appearing only as a statistic. Most researchers wish that all our other New South Wales census were as detailed as that of the 1828. So you can see that it is quite a rare census and you can see its value. So what does it cover? The colony of New South Wales as it was in 1828. This includes Norfolk Island and of course Moreton Bay. And there are, of course, some surprising places. You may not have thought of Raffles Bay and Melville Island in what is now part of the Northern Territory, and King George's Sound in what is now Western Australia. All were part of New South Wales in 1828. The alphabetical return is all but complete, with just a couple of pages missing at the very beginning, numbers 1 to 91 of the surnames beginning with A. The householders' returns, we know, are unfortunately incomplete, but do keep in mind that no census is ever totally complete. So the census of 1828 does not include Aboriginal people. The Aboriginal people are not included in the census in itself provides an important detail as to the priorities, focuses, and values of the colony at the time. The military, the British regiments and their families stationed here were not regarded as part of our population, and so they were not included. Keep in mind that the British regiments stationed here could next week be sent off to British India or to somewhere else in the empire. People often ask us, what are some of the unusual occupations that we've come across when we've been working on the 1828 census? Some of the unusual occupations include things such as artists, astronomer, boot closer, carver and gilder, cowboy, cowkeeper, flax dresser, jobber, mantua maker, needle girl, pig boy, sawpit cleaner, and surely one of the most unusual must be that of John Mazagora, dealer in curiosities. John Mazagora died in 1838, and according to his probate, he was then recorded as a bird stuffer. So it's also interesting to note that at the time of the 1828 census, some people in the colony are prosperous enough to have money to spend on curiosities, perhaps to decorate their homesteads. One of the most unusual occupations would have to belong to Tom Hughes, who was the colony's hangman at that time. You may notice the lovely turn of phrase that he's described as the finisher of the law. So how was it collected? The 1828 census was taken by order of an act of the Governor and Council. The forms were printed and distributed to constables and to other appointed collectors in the various districts, and when completed, formed the householders' returns. Whether the form was completed by a householder, constable, or clerk collector, all the householders had to sign or place their mark to indicate that the information recorded was correct. In many instances, this may be the only extant signature or mark of this person, as civil registration of births, deaths, and marriages was not introduced until 1856. And I'm sure many of you can think back to Edward Gooden's household return and remember seeing his X put to say that it was true and correct. Now, I just wanted to show you some of the letters that we have in the Colonial Secretary's correspondence that perhaps alert us to the huge task that the collecting of the 1828 census would have been. This is a letter from the magistrates in Inverary, Argyll, so down in the Goulburn area, and what they're wanting, they need extra horses to collect the census due to the tyranny of distance, as some of the stations that they have to visit are over 130 miles away. So you can certainly see what a mammoth undertaking the collection of the census would have been. And here you can see that the magistrates in the district of Cockbundoon on the Goulburn Plains are assuring that no trouble has been spared to ensure accuracy. So they're assuring the Colonial Secretary that they've done everything they possibly can to do the utmost to ensure that the 28th census is accurate. And here's another letter from the police office where they're requesting extra clerks to help with the 28th census. And we know from other information that the going rate was 5 shillings per diem, that's per day, to write up the census. Okay, so how was it written up? The alphabetical volumes were compiled from the householders' returns at the time. One copy was sent to England, and this is now held by the National Archives of the United Kingdom, and one copy was kept in New South Wales. So who was the clerk? Whilst many clerks worked on the census, from a closer look at the records, we believe we have discovered the name of the clerk who appears to have worked on the 1828 census, probably compiling the district abstracts and the general abstract for the colony. In the top right-hand corner of many documents can be found in pencil XD RVC, for example, meaning it's been examined by RVC. And this appears to be the clerk who is working on the householders' returns. A check of the returns of the colonies using the alphabetical listing of officers shows that an RV Clarkson was a clerk in the Colonial Secretary's office. If we go to page 76, of the returns of the colony, we see that Clarkson is listed as one of the clerks of the 3rd class, with the details that he was appointed on the 29th of May, 1828 by the governor with an annual salary of £150. Richard Vonell Clarkson, aged 29, came free on the Eliza. He was Protestant, he was clerk in the Colonial Secretary's office, and he resided at 46 Phillip Street, Sydney. And this information we can apply from the 1828 census. He arrived on the Eliza in Sydney on the 16th of May, according to the Sydney Gazette, and he is identified in the paper only as Mr. Clarkson. Thus, he was able to find employment within the month in the Colonial Secretary's office. We're fortunate we do have the shipping list for the Eliza, which arrived in Sydney on the 16th of May, 1828. And there you can see on the shipping list, I've put a star so that you can see near his name, it's listed as Mr. Clarkson. So do keep in mind, you can use the 1828 census as a jumping off point to use other records in our collection. So what can conservation tell us about the 1828 census? The volumes are covered in calf leather. The leather shows signs of red rot, that is a powdery brittleness in the leather caused by defects in tanning or by high temperature and humidity in storage. It is non-toxic. It was sewn onto leather tapes, which makes binding very delicate as leather becomes acidic and brittle and makes sewing thread in contact with it acidic and brittle. Volumes at this time were usually sewn onto linen or hemp thread with fabric tapes or vellum parchment tapes. The spine is not reinforced, which puts further stress on the leather tapes and sewing. Some quill shavings were found in the volumes, and some of these show ink stains. So I'm going to show you some of these quill shavings. So keep in mind how the census would have been written up. and every now and again the quill would need to be sharpened, and so you can see they looked rather like fingernail shavings, but they're not. They are indeed quill shavings. So how did it survive, I can hear you all asking. The alphabetical return in volumes initially passed into the possession of the Inspector General of Police, and it was kept under lock and key. In 1901, it was transferred to the Registrar General, again to be kept under lock and key, with the Registrar General himself retaining the key. New South Wales State Archives does hold the original key to the cabinet. So there you can see the cabinet that the alphabetical volumes of the 1828 census have been stored in, and you can see the lock that locks it, and we do have the key to that lock. It now sits in our safe storage area. How did it become into the possession of the State Archives? The records were given to the care of the Registrar General in September 1901 and remained in the custody of that office until 1965. The 1828 census, the alphabetical volumes now held as State Archives, were transferred by the Registrar General on the 26th of March 1965, according to the Temporary Accession Register, under Disposal Recommendation 631, and the quantity is given as 1 cupboard. The other records making up the nominated 1828 census records were initially held by the Colonial, later the Chief Secretary, then transferred to the Mitchell Library, part of the State Library of New South Wales, and then to the State Archives and Records Authority of New South Wales with its establishment in 1961. So let's have a look if we were to do a local study. When we went out to the regional areas, we tried to highlight someone in the census so that people could see the type of information that they might find. What you can see on your screen now is the alphabetical entry for William Platt. He was aged 29. He arrived as a convict on the Earl St. Vincent with a 7-year sentence. At the time of the 1828 census, he was a stockman on the estate of Darcy Wentworth down in the Illawarra. So we can then look at our convict records and see what we might find out about him. He has a certificate of freedom issued in January of 1829. And as you can see, it has a lot of writing and annotation written across it. So let's just turn that around so that we can see the information given. And we found that his certificate of freedom has been cancelled as he's been convicted in the Supreme Court in Sydney of horse stealing. And so we'll have to follow his story through. He's been convicted in February of 1830. So when I looked at the depositions of the Supreme Court for 1830, there were, of course, a number of pages. And here is the written evidence that given by William Charles Wentworth, the son of his late employer, Darcy Wentworth. And William Charles Wentworth at this time, in 1830, was a barrister of law, and he reports that William Platt rode up from the Five Islands, which is, of course, Illawarra, now, of course, nowadays Wollongong area, on the pretext of asking for instructions about cedar getting. William Charles Wentworth says that these instructions had already been given. The next morning, he was very angry because William Platt came to him yet again, this time asking for money. and so he'd ordered him back, down to the Five Islands, to the estate. But what happened was he sold the horse, and so he was then tried for horse stealing, because he'd sold the horse that he was simply borrowing from the estate. But there is a happy ending many years later. In 1837, after having received a colonial conviction and having served 7 years at Moreton Bay, William Pat finally became free again in August of 1837. And you can see down the bottom that there's details of his original sentence given, and on this certificate of freedom there's the details of his colonial conviction given when he was tried at the Supreme Court in Sydney. So some ways that the information in the 1828 census can be used. The New South Wales State Archives holds free passenger lists from July of 1826, so it can act as an index to the ships on which an individual arrived where passenger lists have not survived. Do keep in mind we also have the convict arrivals dating from, of course, the arrival of the First Fleet in 1788. Civil registration of births, deaths and marriages was not introduced until 1856, so the census may act as evidence of a birth in the colony. The census records family groups together, so this helps us to determine that we have the correct people, perhaps in the absence of a marriage record or in a de facto relationship, they are recorded as a family group. It can also be used as a starting point for other research, such as identifying a convict and then being able to trace a convict's career all the way through. It is a rich source of historical data, which can be used for a wide variety of historical inquiry, including social history, cultural studies, agriculture, economics, and environmental studies. The 1828 census is widely accessible. As you've seen, you can look at many of the records on our website. You can come to our reading room at Kingswood. It's also part of the Archives Resources Kit, includes the household's returns, and of course it is also available on Ancestry.com, and many libraries offer free access to Ancestry. It's also been printed up into book form, into the census of New South Wales, November 1828, edited by Malcolm Sainty and Keith Johnson, and published by the Library of Australian History in Sydney in 1980, and subsequently published with additional information in CD-ROM in 2001 and with a revised edition in 2008. So if you are using the CD-ROM version, that is available in our reading room, as indeed is the book form. The beauty of the CD-ROM version is that you can manipulate the information and just search, for example, all the bakers in New South Wales at 28, or all the people living at a particular place, or all the convicts that arrived on a particular ship. So it is worthwhile having a look at that information. And if you'd like to visit us, we're at 161 O'Connell Street, Kingswood, which is near Penrith. We're open Tuesday to Friday, 9 to 5, and on Saturdays from 10 in the morning until 4 o'clock in the afternoon. We always have an archivist on telephone duty, so if you'd like any advice or guidance, you're very welcome to ring 96731788. Do keep in mind, with inquiries, whether received by email or telephone, we do not offer a research service. We're very happy to provide guidance and offer advice, and you or someone acting on your behalf are welcome to visit our reading room and to undertake research. So thank you for your attendance at the webinar of the records of the 1828 census.